The floodwaters were rising in the small town, and people were leaving as fast as rats leave ships. But one man sat on the front porch, Lloyd, as one man almost always will, praying. And as the trucks went by, one truck said, "Get in the back, we've got room for you. The waters are rising, you're not going to make it." The man said, "I have asked God to protect me, and God will protect me. Drive on." So off goes the truck. The waters continue to rise. The man is soon on the roof. He's on the roof of the house. And he's praying still. "God, look out for me. You've promised to always protect me." And along comes a boat. And it's the last boat. And they stop and they say, "Get in the boat. You're going to drown. The waters are rising. There's no escape. We're the last boat out of town." "No, God's going to answer my prayer. I've been faithful to God all my life. God will hear my prayer. Motor yourself along." So off speeds the boat. The water gets a little higher. Before you know it, he's on top of the chimney. I've been a faithful follower of yours all of my life. I always tithed. I went to church. I helped old ladies cross streets. I did everything right. You promised you would never let me down if I would just be faithful. And here I was praying, "Why'd you let me drown? What am I doing up here? It's a little early, isn't it? I thought you answered prayer." And God waited for him to stop ranting and raving, because, you know, Christians rant and rave. And he said, "What do you want from me? I sent you a truck, a boat, and a helicopter, and you said no to all three." People are like that. If I had a pet peeve, which I don't, camera. If I had one, it would be this. When somebody is in need, to have some response go like this: "I'll pray for you." I hate that crap. "Well, I'll keep you in my prayers." What good is that? Do something.
Amen.
"I'm hungry. I haven't eaten for a week." "I'll pray for you." Feed them. You see Christians doing this all the time. Christians and good people. "Well, I'll just keep you in my prayers." Well, thank you. That's doing me no good. I'm still homeless, and I'm still hungry, and I have needs, basic human needs. But thank you for remembering me in your prayers. Useful and irresponsible. We are a society today, as you know better than me. Everybody is at fault, but nobody is responsible. It's everybody's fault. Someone else will do it. People have a problem today with accepting personal responsibility for anything. Anything at all, anything. Anything, anything. You ever heard the expression, "God helps those who help themselves"? How many of you have helped yourselves, you selfish son of a... Raise your hands if you helped yourselves. Put them up, admit it. Good for you. For the next few minutes, I'm going to rant and rave into the camera. And I'm going to rant and rave about a passage that's so famous that whether you go to a church called Christian or whether you just hang out in the woods and look at the stars, you'll recognize it. You'll usually hear it at funerals. Are any of you dead this morning? Well, that's good. This is a funeral text. It's often just quoted in sections or pieces. I'm going to go through it verse by verse. It's often misunderstood. There is a time and a place for everything. The writer of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 says, a time to be born and a time to die. Like this light. It goes on by saying, there is a time to plant and a time to uproot. There is a time to kill and a time to heal. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry, a time to dance. There is a time to scatter stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, a time to let go. There is a time to search and a time to stop looking. There's a time to tear and a time to repair. There is a time to be silent and a time to speak. There's a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. He goes on, and this is where most don't continue. What does the worker gain from his hard work? I have seen the burden God has laid upon humankind. God has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of humankind. Who can fathom what good God has done from beginning to end? Time. And I've called today's talk, Spring into Action, accepting responsibility for the time of your life. What are you doing with your time? Now the first line, you have no control over whatsoever. And I'm so glad you taught that mother that control over her children is impossible. Control is an illusion.
Because I learned it too.
It's an illusion. We don't really have control. We can suggest, but we don't really have control. There is a time to be born. How many of you remember your birth? Your parents do, some of them not so fondly. It may have been a tumultuous time, a difficult time. How many of you remember your death? Oh, you're alive. Or are you? You see, I spend my days meeting The Walking Dead, which incidentally is a new TV show that's very popular apparently. People who think they're alive because they're breathing and their heart's beating, but they're actually dead and have been for some time because they're not being true to themselves, or they're not living up to their potential, or fill in the blank. There's something not quite right about their lives because they don't know how to be responsible for the time they've been given, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know where to put it, and they don't know where it's going. How many of you are moving along through life too fast? You can put your hands up if you can do it. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? One day you wake up and you're over 50. Or you need a cane. Or your eye's not working right. Or something's aching that didn't ache before. And you watch your bodies moving through time and you're losing the war or the battle if in fact you're trying to fight it. So how do we spring into action and accept responsibility for the time of your life, because you're only here for a small fraction of a second? So let me visit with you just for a second. This is where it's going to be hard to follow me with that camera because I never stand still. How many of you are pleased so far with how you've spent your time?
What?
That's quite a lot. How many of you are pleased so far with how you spent your time? All right, raise your hands again. All right. That means that you can die today. Convinced you have done what you were born to do. Put your hands back up. Good. Let's get your caskets ready. Get out of here. You've done it. You've done it. If you died today, there would be no regrets, no guilt, no unfinished business. You have used your time well. It's not many people that can ever say that. Because there's always a need to have just a little more time. As you look at what the writer does, he goes down and he says, there's a time to plant and a time to uproot. How many of you are gardeners? How many of you understand the seasons and know when to plant something and know when to pull it up and know when to give it extra water and know when to fertilize? Relationships are like that too. You need to know when to pull something up and throw it away. That could be a person with roots in your life that shouldn't be in there. Or a weed. How many of you have people in your lives that are like weeds? Yeah. Yank them out. Or better yet, just spray poison on them and kill them. He goes on to say, a time to kill, a time to heal. Let's examine those words because our country does a lot of killing today. We do a lot of killing. In fact, in other Unitarian churches where I go, they have social justice moments where someone is speaking about killing. Killing that's being done here or there or in the name of. What does the author mean, a time to kill? Is there a time to kill? Yes or no? And you're divided. I see this and I see this across the room because it's controversial. If somebody comes in and just blatantly guns down your family and you have a gun, is it wrong for you to defend yourself? What if you kill them in the process? One more dead. You see, it's not as easy to actually practice as it is to talk about. It's easy to talk about it in the safety of a building where the air conditioning's working and everyone is calm and you're not in a life-threatening situation. But is there a time to kill? Is there a time for a body to die? You bet your bottom dollar it is. The real question isn't this. The question is, who gets to decide? And how do you decide? And what criteria get used for the decision? And who wants to accept responsibility for that call? Judges do it. Governors do it. Police officers do it. A lot of people accept responsibility for making that judgment call. But the writer isn't just discussing body death. He's discussing all kinds of death. Death of relationships. A time to kill. A love or a lust for something. What if you have a bad habit? Raise your hands if you have bad habits. I better see every hand go up on this. There's a time to kill bad habits. A time to cultivate good ones. Why are we so much better at cultivating bad ones than good ones? The same psychological mechanisms exist that we use, but we're just better at bad ones. It's just more fun, I suppose. He goes on. A time to cry and a time to laugh. There's a time to be sad. There's a time to weep. We heard some reasons this morning to weep. Your comment about the thousands, perhaps hundreds, in Nepal. It's sad. But the philosophical part of Mark says, no, it isn't. They were in poverty anyway. They were going to be mistreated. So in a way, part of me is glad they're being spared that. Now, I would never order that from life's menu. I'm not smart enough to know which ones will escape poverty and which ones won't. But I'm divided by it. I mean, while it's a sad event, part of me says, I wonder just how sad it is. Is dying a little sooner sparing you a more painful event later? Perhaps. But we don't know. We can't see that far. We're not that wise. But I always think about that layer. That layer. We act like, well, that's terrible. Is it? One time I buried a day-old infant. He lived about 12 and a half hours. And there was about 700 or 800 people there. Big service. Would be for an infant. The mother was about 19. She had 7 other little ducklings beside her. All of them were hers.
My gosh.
My gosh is an understatement. I exaggerate not even a little bit when I say to you, every person in attendance was on drugs, was high, or was selling drugs. So when I got up and looked over at the little coffin holding that one-day-old body, the first thing I did was say, raise your hands if you're glad this beautiful, unspoiled child did not grow up to join your ranks. Every hand went up. Because they knew they were in trouble. They knew it. So you see, there's a time to weep and there's a time to rejoice. And I turned that time of supposed crying into joy because that one escaped. That one escaped the life inheritance of problems. That one got away. And they all who were there knew it. So you see, sometimes we go to events or we have encounters where we expect to cry when there's really laughter or joy or a blessing, a silver lining built in. Sometimes that happens with our children or our grandchildren or our families. Sometimes what looks bad on the outside is really a blessing waiting to be unveiled. That's what the writer of this is talking about. Being responsible for what has just occurred. I like what he says next. There's a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. He's referring to a time for tearing down and a time for gathering stones to build. In these days, they use stones to build things. There's a time for building and a time for tearing down or scattering or saying what has been built upon is no longer useful. Most of you in the room have built your lives up. You've done certain things to build a life for yourselves. Do you like your lives? Are you happy with them? Would you like to change some of the rooms? Would you like to move some of the stones around? You still have time to be responsible for the rooms you've created and what you've put into the rooms of your life, where you've stored and stacked what you say is important to you. He goes on to say a time to embrace and a time to let go. Raise your hands if you know when to let it go. Amazingly, not a hand has gone up. This is one of the hardest things human beings ever learn, and I don't really think we ever learn it. How do you let go of something? There's a time to let something go. There's a time to embrace and a time to drop it. Just when is it enough to say, I'm no longer your friend, you've hurt me too many times? And how do you know? And how do you say it to them? But there is a time for that. There is a time when a person is no longer a positive influence and they become a negative, vampire, emotionally draining your life away influence, and it's time to sever the relationship and move forward. But most people won't make good use of their time, and most will not take responsibility for that moment in time, and they'll just let it ride out, and they'll say stupid things like this. Well, eventually he'll just wander away. Or I figure in time it'll work itself out. I love that one. In time it'll work itself out. Things don't work themselves out. Not like that. You have to be decisive, take responsibility, and make decisions. There are people in your life, probably many of them your family, that you need to create healthier boundaries with. There's a time. There's a time to embrace. There's a time to say enough is enough and to stop embracing. He goes on to say that there is a time to search and a time to stop searching. There's a time to look for happiness, joy, fulfillment, peace, purpose. And then there's a time to say, I'm here. Bloom where you're planted. You ever hear that one? My grandma used to say, bloom where you're planted, son. And I used to say, I'm not your son. I'm your grandson. Get it right, Granny. That was a sassy thing. Bloom where you're planted. And what she meant by that was make the best of whatever your circumstances. Just make it work. Find a way to be happy in situations that are less than ideal. How many of you do that? That's hard to do also, isn't it? To make the best of situations that aren't exactly ideal. Time to search for happiness. Let's do a little survey. How much time do I have? Time is everything, you know.
not even paying attention. Just go for
As
it.
long as you like.
Raise your hands if you're happy. Raise your hands if you're crappy. Raise your hands if you're at peace. Less. I have waving hands. I never know what that means. Is that at the beginning of a problem, or what exactly is that? Raise your hands if you have fulfilled your life's purpose. Raise your, oh, only 2 or 3. Oh, and one doing this. I love that. Raise your hands if you wake up every day gleeful to be alive. Oh, not all of you can do that. Believe me, it hurts me too. It just looks like I can do it with ease. So most of you in the room then have met your life's ambitions and goals with happiness and peace and purpose. You have lived wonderful template lives. I could take you on a bus with me right now and take you to a theater and line you up and say to the audience I bring in, these people know how to do it. Right? And the bus is waiting outside. Happiness is different than peace and purpose. I'm not happy that it's not sunny right now. But I'm still at peace, and I still have life purpose. Happiness is transitory. It comes and it goes. I don't wake up looking for happiness. I wake up looking for peace and for purpose, for being alive, something larger than myself for which to live, a cause, even if it's just my family. When you've lost that, you have lost who you are. Happiness comes and goes. The author says, don't look for that. Take responsibility for purpose and for peace in your life. It's hard to do when we live in such a tumultuous world, such a discourteous world, such a distracted world. We are a distracted society. Everyone around us is distracted. They're on a device of some kind. You used to be able to say they're on a phone. Now there are so many devices, you have to just say on a device. When you call someone, the first thing you need to now say, etiquette-wise, is, where are you? In my day, you would never ask that question because they would be home, or they couldn't answer the phone. That tells you how old I am. The phones were always at home and plugged into a wall. But now we have to orient ourselves to time and space and accept responsibility for where we are. Have you ever run across somebody in the store who's on the phone just yakking and won't shut up, won't shut up, won't shut up, and they get louder and louder and louder, and they act like they're the only ones there? In fact, everyone around you is like that. You're like in a twilight zone. How many of you have experienced that? Oh, see? I knew that the rate of Xanax prescriptions were increasing here in New Smyrna. There's a time to be silent and a time to speak. Let's conclude with that particular one, because I like it the best. How many of you know when to shut up? 3 of you. You're learning. So you are a Jedi learner. The rest of you are Jedi masters. You've learned when to shut up. Boy, I wish I could take you on the tour bus. Because people don't know when to be quiet. Grandpa used to say, son, open your mouth only if you can improve on your silence. If you got something to say that's useful, say it. If you don't, be quiet, take it in, and just listen. There are people that don't know when to be quiet. There are people that don't know how to say what it is they need to say. Give me some ideas of when it's time to be silent. Just yell anything out. When is it a good time to be silent?
When somebody's angry at you, and don't make it more exaggerated.
When somebody's angry at you or yelling at you. How many of you get yelled at regularly?
Yeah.
How many of you have people yell at you? Get mad at you? Yeah, you ever had that? How many of you been in an argument? How many of you are in one right now? Ongoing. When you're in an argument, most of us are thinking about what we're going to say next, so waiting for you to shut up so we can just get our line in. We don't actually listen. We're waiting for them to shut up so we can fire back. A time to be silent as perhaps at a funeral, a memorial service, or a celebration of life. And if you do say something, don't say something stupid. Don't say something stupid, like an older woman once did to a younger woman who was crying over her deceased child when she said, "Don't worry, dear, you can have another one."
Yeah.
That's stupid. That's stupid.
He's in a better place.
Oh, that's even more stupid,
That's
yeah.
worse.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's another one of my pet peeves I don't have. He's in a better place. How do you know? You been there? Why don't you go and check it out and come on back and let me know? I don't like that. Don't say things you don't know or mean. Just be quiet. In fact, if you have to do anything at all and you just can't stand it, go over and touch their shoulder, touch their hand, say nothing, be present and accounted for and responsible, but don't open your mouth. Because there's nothing you can say with words to console them at that moment. Your presence is enough. So, as we spring into action, learning to take responsibility for ourselves, it obviously starts with the basics. Our mouths, what we say, our eyes, what we see, our ears, what we hear and feel the need to respond to. Being responsible is a big job and starts individually. And we all do this in our own ways. Some of us more strictly than others. There's a lot of people out there that are very good at being irresponsible. I encourage all of us today to be more responsible in learning what not to repeat. Learning what needs to go in one ear and out the other. Learning how to choose our words like love, kindness, generosity of spirit and character. Being kind to one another, just saying nice things. Smiling, just a smile. Maybe you can't think of a nice word, just smile. Being responsible for ourselves and for our neighbors, for our community, to make our little tiny world a better place while we still have time. Because I promise you, what you already know much better than me, you're running out of time. You're on borrowed time. But it's all right. You'll go to a better place. Thank you, guys.